Hi, this is part one of learning Shenandoah. This is a traditional folk song that a lot of people learn when they're younger, and even if you haven't learned it through choral singing, you might have heard it in other places. This is particularly helpful with anxiety because this is a really calming piece and the music moves in a really relaxing fashion. To talk more about why this piece is helpful with anxiety, Wyoming VA psychiatrist Sharda Anandan can explain more.
In a study that looked at effects of music interventions on stress-related outcomes that included a systematic review and 2 meta-analysis studies, the following was observed. Music interventions are used for stress reduction in a variety of settings because of the positive effects of music listening on both physiological arousal, example heart rate, blood pressure, and hormonal levels, and psychological stress experiences, example restlessness, anxiety, and nervousness. To summarize the growing body of empirical research, 2 multi-level meta-analysis of 104 randomized controlled trials containing 327 effect sizes and 9,617 participants were performed to assess the strength of the effects of music interventions on both physiological and psychological stress-related outcomes and to test the potential moderators of the intervention effects. Results showed that music interventions had an overall significant effect on stress reduction in both physiological and psychological outcomes. Further, moderator analysis showed that the type of outcome assessment moderated the effects of music interventions on stress-related outcomes. Larger effects were found on heart rate compared to blood pressure and hormone levels. Implications for stress-reducing music interventions are discussed in this study.
So if this is your first video, then we should go over a few things such as breathing and placement. But if you've already seen the vocal techniques video or you have watched another video and learned another song, then you can skip over this part. But it's always a good reminder of what you should be doing. So just to recap from the vocal techniques video, we should always be breathing with our diaphragm. And our diaphragm is a muscle under our rib cage right about here. And every time we breathe, it pulls out and back in. Using our diaphragm is really helpful to choral singers, especially because it allows for more air intake and it also allows us to control air a little bit better. So when we are going through this song, you should always be breathing with your diaphragm rather than moving your shoulders and your chest. So if you want to try it, you can. The best way to begin learning to use your diaphragm for breathing is placing one hand on your stomach and one hand on your side or your back. And you just breathe in and out and try to make sure that your shoulders aren't moving. I really suggest looking in a mirror while you're doing this because then you can really see whether your chest is moving or more your stomach, which we want the stomach to be moving more than our chest. So if you breathe in, so when we're doing this, we really want to make sure our chest isn't moving just like you saw and only our stomach is moving. It's okay if your chest moves a little bit, especially since you might be just learning how to breathe with your diaphragm, but it's really important because in studies, they've found that using your diaphragm can relieve anxiety for longer. Another thing we talked about in the vocal techniques video is remembering placement. So in our mouths, we have a hard palate and a soft palate. Our hard palate is right behind our teeth, and our soft palate is in the back of our throat. Choral singers generally raise their soft palates when they sing. It's helpful for choral singers, and that's why we sound so different when we sing versus when normal people sing. So if I don't sound completely like you, that's why. And if you want to try raising your soft palate, what I talked about in that video is the metaphor of the vertical Oreo. Imagine you have an Oreo and you put it in your mouth and it's vertically in your mouth. And this part of your mouth should be open and wide, so let's try it. So all of this back here that was raised, that means your soft palate was raised if you were doing it correctly. And sometimes it might make you yawn. That's pretty common with people who are just beginning. To begin with learning how to sing Shenandoah, I will sing the first part on La and then have you follow me. This song is pretty simple because the first and second verses are exactly the same except for the words, and the third verse is the same as the first. Also in the song, if you need to sing 2 octaves lower or an octave lower, don't worry, you can totally do that. And this might take some time, but as long as you keep trying and keep trying to get it into your memory, then you will definitely have a tool that you can use whenever you're feeling anxious. And singing is super helpful for me especially, but I wanted to share that with all of you. To begin learning Shenandoah, we will sing the verses on La and then you can repeat it just like we did in other videos. This time, since the words are pretty easy to catch on, we will be focusing more on the melody and breathing. Let's try singing it on La. So I will sing a phrase on La and then I'll sing it again. And the second time I sing it, you can do it with me. The first part will go la, 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 la. So try it with me. La, 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 la. Then the second part. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. Then the third part. La, la, la. Try it. La, la, la. Then the fourth. La, 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 la. Again. La, 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 la. Then the fifth. La, 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 la. Again. La, 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 la. Next. La, 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 la. Again. La, 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 la. La, la. La, la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. So if you didn't quite get it, that's perfectly okay. I'm also going to break it up into 2 separate parts because there is a lot of melody in one verse. Just try it with me. We're going to do the same thing, but we're only going to do the first part. So let's do it. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, la, la. La, 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 la. La, la, la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. So let's try it again. Hopefully you got some parts of it, but really just focus on repetition. And if you need to, you can always come back to this point and keep practicing with it because there is a lot of notes and changing things. So don't worry if you need to just try and do it more. That's perfectly okay. So let's try it again. La, 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 la. Now you do it with me. La, 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 la. Then the second part. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, la, la. La, la, la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. great job. Hopefully you got some of it. If you didn't, don't worry. We're going to go over it once more. And then after that, if you still haven't gotten it, just go back, keep doing it over and over until you get that part. And then you can go on to the second half of the first verse. So let's try to sing the first half of the first verse, whatever we've just learned. And we'll do the same thing. I will sing a phrase and then you can sing it with me and then we'll go on. So let's try it. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, la, la. La, la, la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. Okay, so great job. And if you didn't get all of it or you still have parts of it missing, just go back and kind of repeat it a little bit. But now we'll try and put everything together just on laws, whatever we have just learned. So let's try it. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, la, la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. Great job, and we will run through it once more so that you really have it down. Let's try that again. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, la, la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. Great job. Now we can go on to the second half. And again, if you didn't get it, just go back through the video. Just repeat it a couple more times. It might take you a little bit longer, but that's perfectly okay. So now on to the second half. I will do the same thing. I will sing a phrase and then have you repeat it. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. 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 So this part was significantly shorter than the first part, but now we will try that part again. So just try it with me. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. 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 So hopefully you got that, but we'll go over it once more. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, la, la. La, la, la. So that was the second half of the first verse, and now we'll just put together the second half without going over it again. So let's try that. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. So let's try it again. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. So great job. Hopefully you got that. And now we're gonna put together the first half and the second half. And we'll try that a couple times. Hopefully you get it, and then we'll go on to words and breathing. So let's try it. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, la, la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. La, great job, and now let's try it again. And if you didn't get it that time, no worries. We're gonna do it again, obviously, so you can practice it again. So let's try it. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. So great job, and hopefully you got that first verse. And now that you have it, the rest of this will be so much easier because it's just putting words into place. So let's go on to the words. The first verse goes, "O Shenandoah, I long to hear you, away, you rolling river. O Shenandoah, I long to hear you, away, I'm bound away, across the wide Missouri." So again, let's just focus on the first half because it's a lot of words to take in. So the first half goes, "O Shenandoah, I long to hear you, away, you rolling river. O Shenandoah, I long to hear you." And throughout this, I will be singing Shenandoah instead of Shenandoah because when you're younger, you learn about certain ways to sing things. And an easier way to sing it is just to sing Shenandoah instead of Shenandoah. But if you want to sing Shenandoah, that's perfectly okay too. This is just how I was taught when I was younger. Let's try singing it. We'll do the same thing as the laws, but I will do the words and then the words again. So let's try that. Oh, Shenandoah, oh, Shenandoah. Then the second part. I long to hear you, I long to hear you, away, you rolling river, away, you rolling river. Oh Shenandoah, oh Shenandoah, I long to hear you, I long to hear you. That was good, and we'll try it again. Let's do it. Oh Shenandoah, oh Shenandoah, I long to hear you, I long to hear you, away, away, you rolling river, you rolling river. Oh Shenandoah, oh Shenandoah, I long to hear you, I long to hear you. Great job, hopefully you got that. Now we can try to put everything together, and just follow me. If you don't get it completely, that's perfectly fine. We're gonna repeat it 2 or 3 times. So let's try it. Oh Shenandoah, I long to hear you, away, you rolling river. Oh Shenandoah, I long to hear you. So great job, hopefully you got that, and let's try it again just for good measure. Oh Shenandoah, I long to hear you, away, you rolling river. Oh Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Great job. Now you know the first half of it, so let's go on to the second half. So the second half goes, away, I'm bound away, across the wide Missouri. So we can do it the same way we did in the beginning. I'll sing a phrase and then I'll sing it again, and that time you join me. Let's try it. Away, away, I'm bound away, I'm bound away, across the wide Missouri, across the let's try it again. Away, away, I'm bound away, I'm bound away, across the wide Missouri, across the wide Missouri. So one thing I didn't mention is that when I was younger, I was taught to say Missouri instead of Missouri. Obviously, that's different than how the state is actually supposed to be called. But if you wanted to say Missouri or you want to say Missouri, either way is good. Now let's try to put the second half together. Away, I'm bound away, across the wide Missouri. And again. Away, I'm bound away, across the wide Missouri. Great job. Now let's put the first half and the second half together. If you need to go over a specific part, I know the first half was a little bit hard because there were a lot more phrases and a lot more notes to learn, but you can always go back, always just make sure you completely know everything before moving on, because later on then you might be lost. But now let's try putting both halves together for the full verse. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Away, you rolling river, oh Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Away, I'm bound away, across the wide Missouri. Great job. Now let's try it again, just so we completely have it. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Away, you rolling river. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Away, I'm bound away, across the wide Missouri. Now that you have that verse down, we can talk a little bit about the breathing. So for this verse, I will give you two different types of breathing. One is a little bit easier if you can't make it all the way through, and one is a little bit harder. So whichever one you decide to do, you can skip over the other one. So the easier one would be, oh Shenandoah, breathe. I long to hear you, breathe. Away, breathe. You rolling river, breathe. Oh Shenandoah, breathe. I long to hear you, breathe. Away, breathe. I'm bound away, breathe. Cross the wide, breathe, Missouri. The harder version would be, oh Shenandoah, I long to hear you, breathe. Away, you rolling river, breathe. Oh Shenandoah, breathe. I long to hear you, breathe. Away, I'm bound away, breathe. Cross the wide Missouri, breathe. So let's try the harder version, and if you can't get that, then just skip over to the easier breathing. It's okay if you can't get the hard one, because sometimes it's just a lot for your diaphragm, but that is nothing negative. It's just that you maybe haven't been using your diaphragm for that long, so don't worry about that. So let's try doing the harder version. So I'll say break every time that we're supposed to breathe in the harder version. So let's try it. Oh Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Breathe. Away, you rolling river. Breathe. Oh Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Breathe. Away. Breathe. I'm bound away. Breathe. Cross the wide Missouri. So obviously I was having a little problem with it. So if you can perfectly do it, that's great. If you can't, don't worry about it. That's perfectly fine too. Let's try the easier version for those of you who couldn't get the harder version. Oh, Shenandoah, breathe. I long to hear you. Breathe away. Breathe, you rolling river. Breathe, oh Shenandoah. Breathe, I long to hear you. Breathe away. Breathe, I'm bound away. Breathe, cross the wide. Breathe, Missouri. So whichever one feels easier for you, that's good, but really stick to that one. Obviously, if you kind of mix the two, that's good too, that's fine. But just make sure you're not breathing in the middle of a word, because if you do, then it throws off the flow and you're not really getting the best of the deep breathing technique. I really can't stress how much you should be using your diaphragm and how important that is. If you don't have practice with it, I suggest getting really familiar with it, because that's the best way to calm your anxiety, because it supports deep breathing a lot more than using your chest and your shoulders. But obviously, if you just want to sing and you just want to try it out, that's okay. Just if you're trying to relieve anxiety, you really should be using your diaphragm. And again, if you are having trouble with it, just place one hand on your stomach and one hand on your side or your back and just keep it on there throughout. So now let's try singing it again, incorporating the breathing. I'll try the harder one, but if you want to do the easier one, that's perfectly fine. But if you don't remember all of it, then you can just go back to where I was saying breathe every time and just kind of run through that a couple times so you really have it down. So let's try it with our breathing, and I won't say break because you might be doing a different one than I am. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Away, you rolling river. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Away, I'm bound away, cross the wide Missouri. So hopefully you got that, and obviously I had a little trouble at one of the spots, but that's okay. I'm still using my diaphragm. I'm still making sure that I'm using it, and I actually had my hand on my stomach. You probably just couldn't see it, but I was really making sure that my diaphragm was being used and that I could feel when my diaphragm was pushing out every time I was breathing so that I got the maximum amount of air. Let's try it again, and then that will be the first verse. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Away, you rolling river. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Away, I'm bound away, cross the wide Missouri. And now you have just learned the first verse and the breathing for it. And again, if you need to kind of use a breath whenever, that's perfectly fine if you're doing the harder version. If you're doing the easier version, really try to stick through the breathing on that part. Great job on learning the first verse. And in the next video, we will learn the next verse. So thank you.